All right, how's everyone doing? I am Rich CELENZA. Thanks for checking out the Rich CELENZA show. And what I'm going to call this is you don't need a lawyer to get a divorce. Now, if you're getting a divorce, I would recommend talking to lawyers, possibly. I was fortunate enough that I have a lot of close friends that are lawyers, even own their own firms. But what was interesting is I didn't even get them involved with my divorce. I didn't get any lawyers, involved with my divorce, but I think I had a different type of relationship with my ex-wife because we both went through divorces when we were younger. And not only one, some of our parents went through more than one. And when it came to getting a divorce, we almost started, and I've said this before in a podcast, we started, I think, from the back and worked our way forward. So we were talking about if we got a divorce, even, when we're engaged or we dated for so long, like, if something ever goes wrong, don't do this to me and don't do that. And let's try to handle it this way. And I know a lot of times people don't want to hear that, especially at the beginning of a relationship. It's supposed to be lovey-dovey and we're supposed to be in love. We're supposed to stick together. We're never supposed to be in the negative because if that happens, but the truth is, as you might know, most people get divorced, or at least 50 to 60% do. So if you got to take an honest approach with this shit. It's not just the relationship you have, but how do you end a relationship a lot of times? And a lot of people can't handle a relationship at the end. Usually one of the two gets hurt, or maybe both are hurt, or whatever the case may be. I think a lot of times when people get divorced, one, for the most part, is very much more angry than the other. Like I said, both can be angry at each other, but a lot of times somebody is scorned more than the other. And it could be of their past. It doesn't even mean cheating. It could be what somebody may have did with money. It may be the way they had the kids turn on them. It could be the way they lived their lifestyle. It could be they turned into something they never thought they would turn into. All these different types of things. I mean, there's a million things. It's very hard relationships in general, especially being married and say I'm going to be with this person for the rest of my life. But back to the divorce. When I was getting a divorce, we handled everything independently, and it wasn't as complicated as you think. You pay your fees to the state or whatever, you fill out the forms. I forgot how much it was, a few $100. And, I remember going to the courtroom. I may have a long time ago talked about this, and we met, and we just were talking. We were actually laughing, socializing, talking about the kids a little bit. And we're looking at all these other couples because it was slammed with lawyers and couples. A lot of these couples couldn't even talk to one another. That's how mad they were with one another. I'm even talking to my ex-wife saying, how can these people be in love at one time, have children, and now hate each other so much they can't have a conversation? Does this happen with, does this just, I can't believe it actually happens. And I think a lot of times you wouldn't treat a lot of your friends this way. I mean, sure, you may break it off, but you may not hate them or resent them to the level of a lot of people when they're getting a divorce. And again, I get there's a fine line between love and hate, but there has to be some level of respect. Now, if the other person outright destroyed you, and they are out there, a lot of people, husbands and wives that are literally out to destroy the other person financially, turn on them, try to get, again, their kids to turn on. Those type of people I could see going to war with. I understand that part of it. But I do think a lot of people don't want to do that or not always in that position. We both, I think, a lot of times through marriage don't realize a lot of mistakes we make personally. We kind of always look at someone else and say, can you believe they did this? Can you believe they did that? They acted this way, they did this. But a lot of times they're not willing to turn it around on themselves and say, how did you behave? Were you perfect? Most likely you weren't. So, but back to the divorce, when we went in front of the judge, I'm going to make this short and sweet, we didn't have lawyers. We were the only ones. And we walked up and they said, they're looking at the two of us standing together and they're like, well, could you separate? Because we're just friends. I mean, at the end of the day, just because you're not with your wife or husband or whoever you're with, you're friends, hopefully. I would hope you're still friends. I don't have to stand on one end of the room and then the other person, like I'm in war and the other person's at the end of the room, when I know that evening I'm going to be picking up my kids to take them to eat and I'm going to see that person too. Like, that's nuts. Anyways, we walked in, the judge got very angry. He's like, separate. And then he's like, asking us all these questions. And the bottom line was, he's like, you didn't get this paperwork. Why didn't you do this? Why don't you have representation? All these things. And literally, me and my ex-wife said, we don't need legal representation. We represent one another. We know what we have to do. We have the best interest of our children. And he said, well, then what's the need of me? Why do you even need me? And we're like, we don't need you. Literally, we said, we don't need you. All we need is your signature. He was very upset. He told me to leave the room. I think he thought I was maybe pulling a fast one on her, which was quite the opposite. And then she came out and she goes, yeah, we're going to work this out. And I was like, good. But I think from what I understand, he questioned her on all these different things with child support and all these other things. And I guess she said, it's really none of your business, Judge. Like, we're going to do it our way. We don't have to do it the way everybody else says. We weren't also in a position of one of us, say, stiffs the other on something. We can handle it. Like, if somebody can't afford child support at one time or somebody can't afford it, we were there for one another, because the truth is, if you have kids, it's about the kids a lot of times. And it's about you respecting one another after a divorce. Your kids will see the way you're acting towards your husband or wife. And again, they're going to also, I think a lot of times, especially if they're younger, that's going to have a major impact on their life maybe when they get married. I wanted to show my kids, we can your mother's still a wonderful person. She loves you very much. She always has your best interests. So do I. It's not about hurting one another to make each other look good. Anyways, I'm just here to tell you, a lot of people I see, and a lot of my friends who I never thought would get divorced, are getting a divorce or have been getting a divorce throughout the years. And some are bad, but some are okay. And I think if they just learned how to more or less sit down, maybe even have somebody else kind of talk through with them, they would save thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars not having to hire a lawyer. Or maybe, again, if you need to hire a lawyer, not getting into the battle, nipping it in the bud, not having things that stretch out for months, not even months, but for years. And again, if you're somebody who's very wealthy and all those type of things where there are a lot of legalities, of course you're going to have to probably get a lawyer. But again, what I would say with that situation is, don't let lawyers take advantage of you, because they will milk something, and it's their job. They want to get paid. And there's good lawyers, there's great lawyers, and then there's bad lawyers a lot of times too, who their interests supersede yours, and that's usually their pocketbook. And don't underestimate anyone when it comes to that. A lot of times you're like, oh, my lawyer is this guy, and he's a friend. I've known him or got recommended, and he's this and that. Before you know it, the two of you or whatever, or whoever's paying for the legal fees, sometimes you pay independently or you pay for them all. Say it cost you 30 grand, 40 grand. I don't know. It could go forever. But all that money is basically hard-earned money. It's also money you could keep for yourself or for your children or their inheritance. So if you know anything about me, I just try to help men master their self-confidence through a bad breakup or divorce. But I do think a lot of women listen to my stuff more than I thought, because I get more comments, which is interesting, from women, especially on my podcast, saying, hey, Rich, I didn't know this. Thanks for telling me about that. But they'll also dispute and say, Rich, I think this or that. But I'm telling you, a lot of times, the one thing I will wrap up with is always take, to a certain degree, the high road. And I know sometimes if somebody's just being a major asshole in a relationship or a breakup or divorce or whatever, it's really hard. But it's really hard not to let somebody really kind of at times destroy you emotionally from being frustrated, especially when it comes to finances, and especially if they're using kids as leverage. It can drive you crazy. But a lot of all that stuff that you're carrying around, it doesn't affect anybody but you. Even if you're emotionally drained and you're destroyed, you've got to get over those things. It's very hard, but you can do it, I can assure you. And a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times when you move on to other relationships and things calm down, you may realize to say, hey, or even if you don't end up in a relationship, that relationship, it took its course. It did what it did. We have wonderful children. Or if you didn't have kids and you end up with someone else, you're like, this is probably the way it was truly meant to be to a certain degree. I wasn't meant to be with this person for the rest of my life. And a lot of times, if you're with someone else, you're like, this is probably, at this point in time, better for me. You didn't realize it at the time. So, kind of a hindsight thing, but I think a lot of us that end up in divorces or breakups or whatever later in life, you kind of understood why you got a divorce. But when you were in the mess, if you wanted it or not, you were kind of lost. But I'm going to wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments, you could go to masteringselfconfidence.com or just richcelenza.com. You can email me too, rich@richcelenza.com. Take care.